Salutations, and welcome to another installment of Patreon Month. Today, dear viewers, we have a particularly engaging topic: video game mysteries. When submitting this request, my generous backer, EKIMMAK, gave me little more than a title, telling me to interpret mystery however I like. So this is what I came up with. I've been on a mystery game kick as of late, so I'll be looking at the head scratchers that had me putting the controller down and thoughtfully stroking my chin, running my eyes over imaginary notebooks and trying to unravel just what was going on. There were other possible avenues I could have taken. A top 10 unanswered questions might be a good topic for another day. Like, I'm still waiting for an explanation on those precursors Assassin's Creed, if Ubisoft ever wanted to get back to that. But I feel mysteries are best judged after you can see the whole picture. A question is posed, we gain clues. Over time, at some point, there's a plot-thickening twist, and eventually we reach an epiphany and a satisfying solution. Today's entries will be judged on all of those qualities, whether from a mystery-themed game or just a fun part of a larger story. However, I decided to be sporting and challenge myself in a different way this week. A puzzle is no fun if someone hands you the solution, so I decided I'm going to keep the mystery alive and write the whole countdown with minimal spoilers. That's right, if you like the setup of any of these 10 turnabouts, I recommend you seek these games out for yourself and get the full experience. Some people are more sensitive to spoilers than others, and to explain my choices, I will have to talk about some details that might come in around the middle of these mysteries. But trust me when I say that I don't want to ruin these games for anyone. If you'd rather go into these completely blind, this might not be the countdown for you. Otherwise, grab your handy-dandy notebook and a strong cup of coffee, because these, my dear Watsons, is the top 10 video game mysteries. Elementary!
I suppose that Watson is right, Inspector. A little brain work would be preferable now.
I've been burning the midnight oil getting this list ready. Comic and I wanted to play as many mystery games as we could before starting this list, and as our deadline approached, I found myself in the middle of LA Noire, considered by many reputable sources to be the greatest game in the detective genre. The problem is, I still haven't finished it, because I was completely absorbed in a game called 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors. So, it's an honorary mention to you, Detective Phelps, but I just could not put my DS down. 999 takes a similar premise to the Saw franchise, though with a little less torture and a lot more legitimate puzzle solving. College student Junpei is kidnapped by a man in a mask named Zero and finds himself locked in a cabin of a ship that's slowly filling up with water. After doing some math to open the door, he runs into 8 other victims who are all on the same boat, pardon the phrase. Each have been given a watch assigned with a number 1 through 9. Zero explains over the intercom that to escape their confinement, they'll have to play something called the Nonary game. And what a mind-twisting game it is. From here, you'll be able to take a number of different paths through the game's story. Scattered throughout the ship are locked doors labeled with big red numbers, and to go through them, the band must split into teams whose assigned numbers form a digital route matching the door. Basically, only certain combinations will work, and it forces you to split up, solve different room escape puzzles, and get to know more about this odd assortment of characters. There's a wealthy-looking blind man and his scrappy little sister, a scantily clad dancer with some hidden talents, the big guy who seems to be suffering memory loss, and oddly enough, a girl named Akane that Junpei recognizes from grade school. It's a motley crew to be sure, but as you get to know the strangers, it becomes apparent that Zero isn't just running some amusing social experiment, and the players might not have been chosen at random. Seven may not remember much, but he seems to know an awful lot about ships, and thinks this prison might be a recreation of the Titanic. Akane, or June as her codename goes, also has a lot of not-so-useless information about chemistry that's suspiciously relevant. Everyone's a little smarter than they look, and to get the big picture, you'll need to play the game multiple times before getting the best ending. At first, it might seem a little meta since you're using information that you learned from a past playthrough while Junpei is in the dark each time you restart, but some of the characters start talking about psychological theories of shared consciousness. There's a weird phenomenon in nature where one isotope randomly adapts to how different isotopes change, and wait a minute, is this an in-universe explanation for save scumming? Can they do that? Well, you're gonna have to play the game to find out. In the meantime, it takes the number 10 spot. Oh man, I should have given this game the number 9 spot, damn it! I had to talk about Professor Layton somewhere today. The dude is pretty much Sherlock Holmes. He's got a Watson-like assistant, a useless Lestrade calling him for answers, and a couple of Moriarchys. Like 999, the gameplay in the Layton series has you solving puzzles, while each story is a complex mystery. To Layton, mysteries and puzzles are one and the same. Some puzzles are made up of numbers or patterns, a mystery is just a puzzle made up of people and motivations. But if I may ask, Mr. Herschel Layton, what's your motivation? As much as we learn about a curious village and a diabolical box, it takes until the third game before we learn much of anything about our emblematic hero. And lucky for us, we get to dive more into his past in a prequel trilogy. Yeah, for those of you who didn't know, the Layton games are a Star Wars thing, where the 4th, 5th, and 6th entries take place before 1, 2, and 3. Instead of the Phantom Menace though, we instead contend with the Last Spectre. And instead of Anakin, Layton meets a boy named Luke and decides to be his mentor. Weird. However, I want to hone in on this guy who shows up in The Last Spectre, Jean Descoulet, an even more mysterious figure who shows up in all 3 prequel games and asserts himself immediately as Layton's greatest rival. Normally I wouldn't call something a mystery if I didn't know there was a question being asked, but when you see this man in a mask, you kind of want to know who he is. Plus, he's nowhere to be seen in the original trilogy, so is he gonna get killed off by game 3, or did he just not bother to show up? In the past games, Don Paolo sometimes comes out of nowhere with a bombastic death trap, but it's played off like, oh yeah, that's my nemesis, we just do this sometimes. And we do eventually get some story on him as well, but Descoulet, he's truly worthy of being Layton's arch rival. He shares Layton's ridiculous fencing skills, he's comically gifted at disguises, and he seems to know us better than we know him. But he's still butting heads with this other guy, Leon Bronev, who later becomes yet another villain to Layton, and Jean keeps insisting that he actually won even when we think we defeated him, so he's got something under his hat. All will be revealed in the Azrin Legacies, not just about Descoulet, but also any lingering questions you've had left about the good Herschel Layton himself. As Layton teaches us, nothing is unsolvable. You just need the right pieces. While they go hand in hand a lot of the time, you don't need a puzzle game for a good murder mystery. Mysteries can crop up in the most unexpected places. I guess you could say... You'll never see it coming! Oh, wait, no, this is Persona 4. My bad. Your protagonist, Yu Narukami as he's canonically named, has just started living with his uncle, Police Chief Ryotaro Dojima, and attending a new high school where he's quickly made some new friends. However, not all is normal in the town of Inaba. On his first night, he has a weird dream where Igor gives him a game tutorial, and he starts hearing about this urban legend called the Midnight Channel. Basically, if you stare at a blank TV screen at midnight when it's raining, you start seeing strange figures on the screen. Sounds like one of those things kids say to freak each other out, like Ouija boards or saying Bloody Mary into a mirror. But not only does it turn out to be true, it turns out that you has the power to pass through the screen into the TV world. It's not as fun as it sounds. I was imagining that episode of Teen Titans where they're chasing Control Freak through different game shows and movies. But the TV world is more shaping itself around the psyche of whoever goes in there, building dungeons based around its victims' experiences and making enemy shadows comprised of their repressed thoughts and guilt. So why do you have this power? Is that part of the mystery, or is the existence of this dimension just something we need to accept as part of this game's world? You tell me. I'll tell you what is a mystery though. Someone besides you has these powers, and is using them to kill or kidnap victims. First, a news announcer is found dead, then soon after, other people start disappearing into the TV world, prompting you and his friends to go in and get them out. Curiously, everyone who gets targeted has been on regular TV, usually the news, shortly before their abduction. Then a shadowy figure of them appears on the Midnight Channel even when they're still around in the real world, and then they disappear, captured and thrown into their own psychological limbo. This serves as the incentive for most of your dungeon crawling, but in the last fourth of the game, the overall mystery takes center stage. You yourself, that being both you the player and you the character, even get asked directly to sniff out who the culprit is. And unlike a lot of the other games I've played, if you guess incorrectly, the game will just let you be wrong. you'll get a sense that the ending you got is the bad one, so maybe keep a couple of spare save files handy, but if the perp gets away, they get away. That's all on you. You. Narukami. If you've been paying attention, you might get it by the end, but even then, there are surprises hidden behind surprises, and that true happy ending won't come easy. If you want to be a hero, the best thing to do is to stay up late watching TV. It's mankind's last hope. I was thwarted last time when I tried to talk about Bigby Wolf, but now it's time to finally talk about The Wolf Among Us. This seems to encroach on my rules as it is set in the world of the Fables comics. However, this is a new story, written specifically for the game, so I think we're good. And besides, I recommend this game even to people who have never heard of the Fables comics. I haven't heard of them before I played this game, and I'm starting to think that it's the best way to experience this game. It's actually a prequel to the events of the books. The Wolf Among Us takes place in 1980s Manhattan, where a community of fables live in secret. It's basically every fairy tale you've ever heard of thrown together, since that's never been done before. Into the Woods, Once Upon a Time, Shrek! Okay, maybe this concept has been done to death already, but there's enough here to keep it interesting. Fables are ageless beings now living in secret amongst the common people, using spells called glamours to hide their fantastic appearances. We are put into the shoes of Bigby Wolf, once known as the Big Bad Wolf, whose job is to keep the fables from killing each other and making a scene, which is no easy task. While checking in on a drunken woodsman, Bigby encounters a kind, unidentified fable named Faith who's constantly looking over her shoulder. A few hours later, Faith's disembodied head is found on his doorstep with a threatening note warning Bigby to stop poking his snout into other people's business. It's your standard film noir setup, but what elevates it is this game's intriguing use of setting. Mystery stories have a lot of work to do, setting up character motivations, locales, time periods, and the rules of fictional elements that usually require a lot of exposition. But Wolf has the advantage that you've probably heard of most of these characters before. You don't know this version of the characters yet, but household names like Snow White and Ichabod Crane mean something before you get a hint of backstory. This really helps fill in character relationships, like the friendship between Bigby Wolf and one of the three little pigs based mostly on guilt, or his fierce rivalry with the woodsman from Little Red Riding Hood. Maybe we don't know why Beauty keeps disappearing every night, but it sticks in your head pretty quickly that she's married to the Beast, and this pre-established information lets us focus on mystery rather than trying to construct the basic foundation of this world. It's just an intriguing thriller with likable characters that you kind of recognize. Though I had no idea who Georgie Porgy was at first, but I looked it up. More obscure is the name that hangs over everyone's testimonies, the Crooked Man. Who is he and what does he have to do with Faith? Well, it's Bigby's job to hunt him down. This game is very telltale. It gives you a lot of choices that don't affect the overall story as much as it claims they do, but if you're okay with only an illusion of freedom and just interested in a great story, give it a try. It's time to show the world why it needs the Big Bad Wolf. There are games that are celebrated as masterpieces and games that are ridiculed for being hilarious failures. In recent memory, I can't think of a game that sat more precariously on the fence as Heavy Rain, an innovative, interactive drama that admittedly takes itself way too seriously. Not everyone liked its Simon Says gameplay, it's slow-paced right out of the gate, and it has one of the most laughably bad sex scenes you'll ever be subjected to. Also,
Jason! Jason! Jason!
But I'm not gonna sit here and say that this plot isn't amazing. The narrative revolves around a serial killer who's been kidnapping children and leaving folded paper animals behind. We switch between four main characters: Norman Jayden, an FBI agent on a case to find the origami killer, Scott Shelby, a retired cop turned private eye who's conducting his own investigation, Ethan Mars, whose son was abducted by the killer, and Madison Page, who's also there. While three of these characters search in their own ways, Ethan finds a set of instructions from the killer, telling him to perform a series of heinous, death-defying tasks if he ever wants to see his little boy again. The first one is driving 5 miles through oncoming traffic, and it only gets scarier from there. A central mystery can be a real hook for audiences, and Heavy Rain is no different. A simple question sits unanswered throughout the entire game. Who is the origami killer? Such a simple quandary, but so elegantly crafted, just like those folded parchments he leaves at his crime scenes. The FBI think they have the culprit early on, but come on guys, it's not going to be your first suspect. While Jaden has advanced VR technology that helps him simulate the murders, it alone can't solve this one. You'll also need Madison and Scott getting their hands dirty in low places. There's just so much freaking tension in this game. You keep having to do these horrible things to get more information, especially poor Ethan, but you can never tell if you're getting any closer. The game has a lot of different endings depending on choices you make and your ability to complete the tasks, so you can chicken out if you want, but the identity of the killer becomes an obsession. You've already put Ethan through such hell. If you stop now, it'll all be for nothing. And yeah, you want to get Ethan's son back. His family suffered enough. But the main thing driving me forward at this point is, who the hell is this sick bastard? It's such a simple premise. How far are you willing to go to get answers? Hey, no, take that mouse away from the search bar. Don't you dare look it up. You want answers? Play the game. You have to suffer what I suffered. Like in Heavy Rain, a good mystery can be the driving force that keeps a player in the game. But what about a game you otherwise don't really want to play? For example, I don't really like playing horror games. I don't like being scared. It's scary. I like being in control and comboing enemies into oblivion. Were it not for my need to unravel a game's plot, I probably wouldn't finish most horror games. But that's part of what makes Silent Hill 2 one of the best. I didn't want to include any mysteries that didn't have any definitive answers, and the answers to the unhappiest town in America leaves a lot to speculation. I've spent some time in the series, and I'm still not entirely sure why Silent Hill is the way it is. That's part of what makes it so unsettling. To take a quote from the great Stephen King, nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear. As it so happens, that quote is also used at the beginning of Alan Wake, another honorable mention for this list. But what that quote means is, a haunted town gets a lot less scary once the author explains it to you. Blaming it squarely on a cult or a hellmouth or aliens would weaken the fear factor. But riddle me this. If this town was full of monsters, wouldn't James have heard about it on the news or something? Why do the roads suddenly end like this? Why do some doors seem to teleport me across buildings? And why is this little girl not afraid of anything, because I'm freaking terrified here? There's a lot to interpret about the nature of Silent Hill, but the case of Mary has a very concrete answer to it. James lost his wife Mary to that damn disease a few years ago, and yet James finds a letter signed by Mary telling him to meet her in Silent Hill, an old vacation spot that was very important to the both of them. Does this mean Mary's alive? Let's ask around. We meet Angela, who seems nice enough in the first meeting but has gone downhill by our second encounter, Eddie, who doesn't make the greatest first impression, this freaking little girl who thinks this is all a game, and a bunch of armless abominations trying to kill James. Then there's Pyramid Head, an invincible beast that traps us in a flooded stairwell, which doesn't even make sense because we're on the second floor of an apartment complex. How the hell does it flood? Angela and Eddie mention seeing a bunch of monsters, but have no idea what James is talking about when he mentions Pyramid Head. And the kid seems unconcerned with the monsters, and is more concerned with telling us we never really loved Mary. Hey now, wait a second, she knows Mary? Where is she? And if James has been here before, why doesn't he know his way around? Moments later, we meet Maria, who is not Mary, but looks exactly like her, except eerily hotter. Sometimes she doesn't have a care in the world, but other times she's very stressed out by the monsters and blames us for bringing her along. I just want my wife back, okay? So what the hell is going on here? At times it seems like the weird character behavior is just a symptom of poor writing. There's a lot of awkward dialogue in this game, but if anything, that just makes the whole thing creepier. All the more reason why an HD update with new voiceovers was a bad idea. The fog isn't just there to hide the game's poor draw distances, it's concealing the truth, with the help of seemingly stupefying writing and an apparently incompetent protagonist who's never quite as upset about the monsters as he should be. Well, rest assured, Mary's out there. But you might not like what you find out along the way.
Must have been unconscious for a while. My head feels fuzzy.
Wait a minute, didn't I do this already? Oh yes, it's Ghost Trick Phantom Detective, home to my favorite ghost of all time, Sissel. I gave this game a decent synopsis during my top 10 ghosts countdown, and I didn't spoil it there, and I don't plan to do it here either, but I can expand on it a little bit. Sissel wakes up in a junkyard to find that he's deceased. He now has no body of his own, instead he's just this little ball of ectoplasm that can inhabit items in the environment. Making it more disorienting, Sissel has no memories of his previous life, but judging by the crumpled body near him, he's been murdered. Even the name Sissel takes some investigation to remember. He has little time to process this before he witnesses a rookie cop named Lynn about to be shot. Unfortunately, he can do little more than slightly affect some inanimate objects and fails to save Lynn, but another ghost, currently possessing a desk lamp, explains to Sissel that he has the power not only to affect pieces of junk, but to talk to the recently departed and turn back time 4 minutes before their death to possibly prevent an untimely demise. This doesn't particularly interest Sissel, who'd much rather find out who he is and why he died, but Ray the Lamp informs him that he only has until sunrise before he passes on to the next world, and his best bet at finding answers is to follow that redhead. It's a conundrum-quashing adventure that's hard to talk about without immediately tripping over spoilers, but you'll be amazed what basic assumptions become misdirection, what seemingly minor characters become incredibly important, and all the while you'll be playing a really inventive puzzle game. It's too late for Sissel to save himself, but he can save a whole lot of other people. Usually Lynn. Seriously, she dies every few minutes. And he can at least find out who he was and why he was murdered. And the answer to that question? Well, I have to admit, I did not see it coming. But looking back over it, yeah, it all makes perfect sense. If you managed to figure out who Sissel was ahead of time, you've earned your bragging rights. But please don't deprive new players of a great twist. And if you didn't listen to me the first time, get this game. It's on the App Store, and it's really cheap. Go get it right now. And get 999 while you're at it. Some of the entries on this list, including the top 2, come from dedicated mystery games, while others are a part of a different kind of game, like RPGs or horror games. The game for number 3, well, it's barely what I'd call a game at all. To the Moon is really more of an interactive story that you traverse from a top-down perspective, with an occasional stupid panel switching puzzle. Nothing to write home about in gameplay, but in terms of story, I was enthralled. This game is beautiful, and all of it hinges on that enigmatic title, To the Moon. You play as Eva and Neil, agents from the Sigmund Corporation in the not-too-distant future. They're hired to meet with the elderly on their deathbeds to find out what their greatest wish or regret in life is. If they could change anything, what would it be? Then they use a machine that allows them to enter the patient's memories and alter them so that they made that choice. It won't be reality, but the patient will die believing things went the way they wanted. Sort of like Inception, but nicer. They're hired by this kindly old man named Johnny Wiles, who lives on the Cape, and when asked what he wants to change, Johnny simply replies, "I want to go to the moon." He doesn't know why. He's never felt this way before, but in the past few months, he's felt this desperate longing to go to the moon. Fair enough, the agents decide. But changing memories isn't as simple as changing some code around. If the events of the false memories aren't logical, the patient's brain will reject them as imaginary and it will all have been for nothing. So the agents travel backwards through the life and times of John. They meet his terminally ill wife and find out that their marriage was a little rocky. After becoming sick, she became obsessed with making these origami rabbits, and though it's never stated explicitly, it's implied that she's somewhere on the autism spectrum, which makes it hard for her and John to relate to one another sometimes. We meet John's mother, his friends, ride some horses, watch a movie, and while his life is far from perfect, he never shows any interest as a boy or a man about becoming an astronaut, and has no prospects of ever going to the moon whatsoever. All the way back to where his memories cut out somewhere around the age of 7. All we have to go on is this ugly platypus doll and an army of paper rabbits. Was John's desire to go to the moon just triggered by the fear of death, or is this old man just screwing with the Sigmund Corp before he dies? The doctors say there's not much time to find out, and guys, unless you're made of stone, You're gonna wanna find out. And it's worth every crappy panel puzzle. This game is amazing. Play the game and have yourself a good cry. I promise you'll be glad you did. How can you hear that music and not get pumped to just figure stuff out? That's the entire aesthetic of the Danganronpa series in a nutshell. Super hyped thinking about stuff. I feel like this series came out of nowhere too. Technically it's existed since 2010, but all of a sudden last year everyone was talking about it. And I can see why. It's like the Persona 5 of mystery games. It's just got so much style and personality. The mysteries themselves are the real hook of these games, full of twists so sharp they give Shyamalan a hernia. Also, a lot of death, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Danganronpa 1 follows Makoto Naegi, the most average of average students who's just been accepted to the illustrious Hope's Peak Academy. It's believed the alumni of Hope's Peak will grow up to solve all of the world's problems, and lead society to a prosperous new era. Any student who graduates here is set for life, but the only children admitted are those at the top of their field, whatever field that may be. There's a teen pop idol, an unparalleled martial artist, some star athletes, a brilliant young programmer, Baron Trump, and even a popular fanfic writer. So why is Makoto here? He won a lottery, making him the ultimate lucky student. Yeah, we'll see where this luck gets him. On what was supposed to be his first day, Makoto is somehow knocked out and wakes up with his new classmates in some kind of prison. But it still looks like the inside of the school. With little time to wonder where they are or why, they meet their master of ceremonies, this freaking bear! Long story short, they're being held captive here, and the only way to get out is to play a little game with Monokuma here. You can already see the parallels with 999, but here the game is a bit more homicidal. Any student who wants to leave will only be dismissed if they murder another person, but even that's not enough. They have to do it in secret, not get caught. After a murder, the students will conduct a trial and investigation to determine who the killer is, and if they guess correctly, the killer is executed. If they're wrong, the killer gets to leave, and everyone else is terminated. That's rough. This leads to a handful of really inventive murder mysteries, and it's really hard to find non-spoilery footage here because this game likes to morbidly hang reminders of everyone who's died around the courtroom. But the greatest mystery of all is... why? Is this really Hope's Peak Academy like Monokuma says? And if so, what the hell happened? Why hasn't help arrived yet? How did someone convert this school into a hell house? It's commonly understood that Monokuma is just an incredibly sophisticated animatronic. So if he's just a puppet, who's pulling the strings? There's a lot of long-term questions that hang over the whole game, and they blend in beautifully with each case, so you always have a plate full of intriguing queries. Every character seems to have something to hide, and while the premise might appear limiting, you'd be amazed how many motivations and executions for murder can arise from this small group. If anything, as the pool of characters grows smaller and smaller, it's all the more baffling how any of this is still happening. Danganronpa 2 and 3 are all around better games in my opinion, with even stronger casts and crazier twists, but the confined setting of this first game makes for the most compelling mystery in my opinion. It's one big closed room, so all of the puzzle pieces have to be in front of you, right? Danganronpa understands good mystery like few other stories. The reveals are shocking but also fair. It's constantly tipping its hand and giving you hints about the inner workings of Hope's Peak. You can give into despair, or you can rise to the challenge and bring some light to this fallen beacon of hope. You can't rely on luck forever. You are tasked with defending a man from a murder sentence. Last night, the plaintiff and the victim were alone. The plaintiff and victim are known enemies. There is photo evidence of the two of them on a small boat, in the middle of a lake, alone. They were talking about revenge. The victim is shot twice in the chest, and your defendant is holding the gun. Well, you're the one with the perfect record, Mr. Wright. Figure this one out. Ace Attorney has given us a library of great cases over the years, from the breathtaking finale of Trials and Tribulations to the interwoven threads of investigations to the downright craziness of the 3DS titles. Each game's finale outdoes the last in sheer height, but no mystery has enraptured me like the climax of the original Phoenix Wright Turnabout Goodbyes, and at the middle of it all, the DL6 incident. Yeah, maybe I'm playing favorites here, maybe Danganronpa is more complex, more perfected, more adult, but this isn't about cleverness or fuchsia-colored blood. This is about a hero who never gave up on his defendant, or for that matter, his friend, even when everyone else did. I think we take it for granted now how well developed the relationship between Phoenix and Edgeworth is. It's a fierce rivalry at first, only made tenser by Edgeworth's track record and how he's first introduced in the wake of Mia Fey. But throughout the game, you get the sense that this contention is a long time coming. Phoenix has some kind of past with Edgeworth, says he can never forgive himself for what he became, but won't bring himself to say anything more, not even to Maya. Then, slowly, Edgeworth becomes an odd ally to Phoenix in the next couple of cases. Sure, they're technically hired to argue against each other, but when all the cards are down and the killer is obvious, Phoenix and Edgeworth will even work together to grill a witness and reach the truth. They foster a strange respect for each other. But then, this happens. Robert Hammond murdered, with Edgeworth as the only possible suspect. Not even Edgeworth himself will deny he did it, but Phoenix won't accept this. If Miles won't stand up for himself, Phoenix will. What makes matters worse, Edgeworth has a decent reason for killing Hammond, the DL6 incident. 15 years ago, Miles' father Gregory was murdered in a broken down elevator right in front of young Miles, and Hammond is the lawyer who got the killer, Bailiff Yanni Yogi, acquitted, pleading temporary insanity. Could Miles have killed Hammond for letting his father's killer go? That's what the new prosecutor thinks, the new prosecutor being Manfred von Karma, Edgeworth's undefeated mentor and a really scary guy to oppose while you're trying to piece this paradox together. To free Edgeworth, Phoenix will have to lawyer harder than he's ever lawyered before. He'll have to contend with his greatest opponent yet. He'll have to unearth the secrets of 2 generations. And when he's up against the wall, his last hope might just lie in the testimony of a parrot. I'm not kidding. Quirky as this game is, this was the case that had me glued to my DS and cemented my love for the man in the blue suit. Even as the series progressed, the shadow of the DL6 incident hangs over everything. It's amazing how many lives it affected. Franziska von Karma, the Fae Clan, even a major villain in the 3rd game. Even after closing the case, the murder of Gregory Edgeworth shapes the world of one of my favorite all-time franchises. And for that, I am extremely thankful. It's the case that turned one of my favorite gaming protagonists into the man he is today. I'm the Green Scorpion, and if you haven't played all of the games on this list, maybe I've piqued your interest towards a few things. I highly recommend you play these games, and the other Layton games, and Danganronpas, and especially the other Ace Attorney games. They're among my favorites for a reason. So, hooray for mysteries! They help shape some of the most influential games I've ever played, some of the greatest epiphanies, and some of the most devastating betrayals. In fact, next time, how could you?